the first one is the first two that we're going to cover, you actually don't give a manual muscle test grade. So you just use a descriptive term to say that the person has normal, moderate, marked weakness, okay? So you're going to use descriptive terms instead of the 0 to 5 scale that we've been using. So Preston, I'm gonna have you put your hands behind your head. There you go. And what I want you to do is lift your upper body and head and shoulders completely off the table. I'm just gonna hold your legs for you, okay? So go ahead and lift on up. Can you hold it there for 6 seconds? So I don't know, Andy, if you noticed he deviated to his right when he came up. And go ahead and go back down. Okay. I looked for whoever was in line with me. Go ahead and come up, Preston, just so she can see. At a time. Yeah. He's not coming up quite as far on that side. Okay. Good. See, so we found something right away for you.
Yeah.
So he was able to hold it for 6 seconds and he didn't start to go down. For some of you, you might find this one is super important to hold for the full 6 seconds because some of you will have a hard time holding it for that long. Okay? So that might be another reason why you downgrade someone and say that they have slight weakness or marked weakness, is if they can't get off the table. Now, if for some reason he tried to come up and couldn't come up at all, I need to either test his hip extensors, or I can come in and apply pressure here and then go ahead and come up again. Okay, so I can do that test as well. Go ahead and relax. By holding his ankles, I'm actually giving his hip extensors something to push against and help activate those to stabilize the pelvis. So that's why we do hold the legs for this one. Okay? All right, so Preston, you can put your head however you want so that you can breathe. We're gonna test your Quadratus Lumborum now. Which, do you play soccer?
No.
So for people who play soccer, it's the muscle that people use to hike up their hip before they kick through the ball. So it's our hip hiking muscle. When you're lying down on the table, it's actually really hard to do if you haven't thought about hiking your hip up. So what I want you to do is you're gonna slide your leg along the table and just lift up like that. Oh, that's great. Okay, I do need you to slide down just a little bit further. There you go. So this is another one that we're not going to give a manual muscle test grade to. We need to stabilize the opposite leg. We're going to have the leg just slightly abducted, and then, can you scoot down towards me just a little bit more? He needs room to be able to hike that hip, and if his shoe is hitting the edge, he's not in the right position. And this table's got we were gonna impale him on the, there we go. Okay, so I'm stabilizing on one side. This is gonna be a little bit tougher to do on the low tables. So we're slightly abducted. Go ahead and hike this hip just like you did, great. Now hold it there, don't let me pull it down. And relax. So some of you were able to see the Quadratus Lumborum contracting. So that's gonna be lateral to the paraspinals. And Preston has a nice strong Quadratus Lumborum. For some people, some soccer players, this muscle is super important and you wanna make sure that it's symmetrical on both sides, okay? If soccer players are predominantly left or right footed, you'll be able to pick that up in their Quadratus Lumborum, that asymmetry. All right? Can you tell me what the next one is? Please, Anna?
Yeah.
Lateral trunk flexors? All right. Preston, let's have you lie on your side facing that way. Okay, so you're gonna put this hand under your head, so your head is supported. We're gonna put this pillow underneath between your knees. There you go. Now we wanna make sure that his hip and shoulders and head are in a straight line, so I'm gonna bring your head back just a little bit. Can you, there you go. You can go ahead and put your hand under there again. You're bringing your head a little forward. Can you bring your head back? There you go. All right, so what I'm going to do is lean on your pelvis just like this. And what I'm gonna have you do is lift your whole body up off the table, and I'm looking to see how high you can get that left shoulder off the table.
Sure.
Now the trick is, I want you to try not to rotate as you come up, or even arch your back or slouch your back. I want you to pretend that you're only moving in that one plane.
And you apply pressure.
And I'm gonna apply pressure there, yeah. All right, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead and come on up. and relax. Okay. So this test has an alternate grading scheme. So to get a 5, you have to be able to get 4 inches off the table. The arm has to get 4 inches off the table. You can get a 4 if you are 2 inches off the table. And a 3 is no more than 2 inches. Okay. After that, so a 3 minus is going to be if we have Preston try to lift up but don't actually come off the table. If we see approximation, if I'm holding his pelvis again, if we see his hip go up and his shoulder go down, but there's not actually any lifting off the table, that would be a 3 minus. Okay. We get down to 2, you actually go supine. So go ahead and go supine for me. Lie on your back, please. There you go. Good. So now we're still testing the lateral trunk flexors. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you put your arm actually right there. It's good. I want you to try to bend to your side. So I want you to try to bring your shoulder down to your pelvis. So when I just had you on your stomach, I had you hiking your hip. That's not what I want. I want you to try to kind of crunch that side. But what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of resistance to help you do that movement, okay? So go ahead and come on down. Good. And relax. So I am giving him something to push against to try to facilitate that movement, okay? Then down to a 1 is still going to be palpating for a muscle contraction. So now what I'm going to do is apply the resistance in the shoulder. I'm going to palpate the obliques and come on over. Go ahead and push into my hand, try to arch. There you go. So I'm palpating for a contraction and relax. And then a 0 would be absent. Did you have a question, Emily?
Are you doing the lateral trunk flexors or
Yeah.
the oblique trunk flexors?
The lateral trunk flexors.
Okay.
Thank you. The obliques we're going to do it a little bit differently.
Okay.
We're still testing the obliques for the lateral trunk flexors, but yeah. Okay. So our first 2 did not have a testing scheme for the 0 to 5. It's just a descriptive term. This one has a different scale, and all the rest of them are also going to have different scales. Okay. So the next one is going to be the obliques. And this one is a tricky one for the therapist because I have to put you in the position. The other thing is, so I call it the abdominal Macarena. So for this one and the rectus abdominis, how you get different manual muscle test grades depends on where your hands are. So a 5 will be behind your head, a 4 will be across your body, and a 3+ will be with your arms out to the front. Okay?
Did you talk through or want to talk through this compensation specifically for
the lateral trunk
lateral
flexors?
flexion?
I did talk about rotating forward or backwards and arching the back and rounding forward. Is that
just me then?
okay? Well, I didn't do it in sequence, so I did it earlier. Then I talked about grading. So, okay. So so what Dr. Bryant's talking about is if you see that rotation backwards or the rotation forwards or arching their back or slouching forward, that means there's some asymmetry from their anterior and posterior muscles that cause that deviation. So you want to be paying attention to those compensations. Preston moved straight up. Okay? Did he rotate?
He rolled back.
Oh, he did. I thought you looked good, but we've got a peanut gallery who said you didn't. So I would need you to do it again so we could get you a true manual muscle test grade. Okay? All right. So for the obliques, so we're actually going to put you in a position where you're going to be about 45 degrees, a little more than that, about 60, in long sitting, and you're going to be rotated to one side, and you're going to hold that. Okay? So I'm going to start with your hands just across your chest. So I'm going to have you help me out because I'm not that strong. Okay, we're going to come back here, and I'm going to rotate you. There you go. Can you hold it there?
So hard.
Good, and relax. So he would get a 4 for that because his hands were across his chest. Now, he was able to hold that quite well, and so I probably wouldn't have had, if I were really testing him, I wouldn't have had him hold that the full 6 seconds. I would have gone back and supported him, have him put his hands behind his head, and then have them redo that test. But I wouldn't have him go the full 6 seconds where it looked like it was really easy for him. Okay? And then you need to go to the other side. But you're putting them in the position. It's not completely passive. They can help you get up into there. But this is one of those rare times when you're putting them in that position.
Where would you normally have them start? Would you do arms out first? Or would you just kind of gauge it on the person you're with?
Yeah, so I would base it on their subjective history and what I've heard. Honestly, for a lot of people with low back pain, I'm not even testing their abdominal strength on the first day. If I suspect any kind of disc problem, if they do any of these tests incorrectly, we're gonna make that disc worse. And so this is something that I would do later. So there was no reason to not have Preston start with his hands behind his head. I typically don't have people start with their hands forward, but that's just not true. So my gals who have chronic pain, who are middle-aged women, and they're just generally deconditioned, that would be the first thing I would do, is have them just have their arms straight out. Okay, so your answer was correct. Now, documenting this, you cannot say that you're testing the right lateral flexors, or the right obliques or the left obliques, because we're getting opposite sides that are helping with each rotation. So you need to label it by the motion that you're doing. Okay, so you're gonna say, well, obliques, right rotation, 5 out of 5. Obliques, left rotation, 5 out of 5. So we're violating a whole bunch of rules here. One, I'm putting him in the test position, which we would not normally do for a manual muscle test. We're documenting a motion instead of a muscle, which is not what we would normally do. Okay? All right, so that was our 4th one. Okay? Do we want to stop there, or do you want to keep going? Well, let's do one more. So, because the next one is the sit-up, right? Yeah. So, for the sit-up, we're going to use the same abdominal Macarena. So we're going to have behind the head, across the chest, and arms straight out for that 3+ through 5. Okay? So this time I'm going to take your pillow from you, and what I'd like you to do is put your hands behind your head, and I'm going to have you do a sit-up. And this is another one that I would never have the person do a full sit-up if they had a disc, I suspected a disc problem. So what I want you to do, though, is don't just sit up. What I want you to do is to lift up your head, and then your arms, and then your shoulders, and then go ahead and sit all the way up, okay? All right, go ahead. Good. And back down. So he did that with good technique because he rounded. Now, can you try to keep your back super straight and do it all from your hips? Okay, hold on a second. Let me give you something. Now do it. Okay, do you see the difference in there? He was able to use his hip flexors to get himself more of the way. And that's why we don't hold the legs for this one, because what that does is give the hip flexors something to fight against, and so you can recruit the hip flexors. Okay? But you're going to grade that with the same Macarena score as you would before. All right? Okay, so let's go do those.